Alright, welcome back. Today is going to be Unit 3, Day 8. Some reminders to have your history notebook out and you're taking notes as you move through the video. And make sure that you complete the vocabulary for this video. And let's go ahead and get started. So our key terms for the day are the Constitution of 1824, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, the Monroe Doctrine, Mexican-American War, Benito Juarez, Juan Manuel de Rosas, the Middle Class Radical Party, Porfiraro Diaz, Las Cientifocs, Mexican-American War, Panama Canal, and Big Stick Diplomacy. Our key concepts are going to be foreign involvement in Latin America and the effects, Latin American economic growth in the latter part of the 19th century or 1800s, and then Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil in the latter part of the 19th century or 1800s. Now let's start with Mexico. Now Mexico really becomes a nation with the Constitution of 1824. And this kind of forms the United Mexican States, which is the true independence from Spain. It starts off with a federalist structure with a strong provincial government, and states had enormous influence and independence. They had a government, but it wasn't a centralized government. While there is equality under the law, it's really just a phrase without reality, meaning that it's just said, it's not really enforced. This leads to no rights for the poor, Indians, or mestizos. This really leads to kind of instability. And in 1835 to 1855, a caudillo, which is a kind of general, kind of takes control. This general is Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, and he's really going to create a more centralized government. At the same time this is happening, the Anglo-American settlers of Texas begin to settle, and eventually they begin to rebel, and they declare independence. Well, Santa Anna does not want this. He goes to fight the Texans, and eventually he does lose, and he's captured. Well, due to the failure of that, plus losing tons of land such as Texas, California, and much of Mexico north of the Rio Grande during the Mexican-American War. They have a kind of a liberal rebellion against the caudillo, which resulted in Santa Anna being ousted. This leads directly to the Reforma, Juarez, and then French intervention. They create a new, more liberal constitution. Conservatives are going to reject this liberal constitution, and they go to France as an ally. Well, in 1862, the French overthrow the new Mexican government. They place Maximilian of Habsburg on the throne as emperor. Right? The French forces, right, are then withdrawn. Right? They do, I believe, execute Maximilian of Habsburg. The liberals return to power under Benito Juarez in 1867, and Juarez continues to govern till his death in 1872. The next big guy you need to know is Porfiraro Diaz. He's known as the politician. He's a cunning politician. He knew how to manipulate people to his advantage with pan or palo, bread or the stick. And this was a systematic, methodical regime with a staunch military mindset. He managed to dissolve all local authorities and aspects of federalism, meaning that there's no more state control. It's all centralized government. The legislature was composed entirely of his closest and most loyal friends and family. A big part of this was the Los Cientifocs, or the scientists. These are technocratic advisors to Diaz, and these scientific advisors were developments common to Latin American states. They're really going to be the one. Technocratic advisor is someone who is trained in one aspect of a technological development. So you may have one technocratic advisor that's based in the Industrial Revolution. That's their whole job, and that's what they're going to advise the leader on. Diaz will also suppress the media. He's going to control the court system. But he's also going to give mestizos political power and political positions of power, which was not something that happened before Diaz. He did the same with the elites in Creole society. He didn't interfere with their wealth or their haciendas or their farms. Um, and he neither assaulted nor protected the church to kind of not anger the kind of more conservatives. And the dominant Native American Indian population was almost entirely ignored. Now, Diaz's economy, Diaz is going to welcome foreign investors with open arms. He's going to encourage foreign investment because the country's in serious debt and had minimal savings and didn't really have any U.S. investors. They're in debt because of conflict, revolution. They had to raise money to fight foreign invaders, and Diaz stuck largely to more liberal principles. He freed up land for private exploitation, purchased by his loyal political followers and friends. The money was not used to improve the lives of the people of Mexico. It was more just to improve the, political machine or his closest friends and family. His modernization programs were also at odds with the owners of large plantations. Rich plantation owners wanted to maintain their existing feudal system, and they were reluctant to transform into a capitalist economy, which is what Diaz was going for, with competition in foreign markets. Remember, more competition in foreign markets equals less profit. Let's talk about Argentina. Now, Buenos Aires dominated the region of Rio de Plata, and Rio de Plata, if we remember back, was a kind of a large kind of collection after becoming independent, and it's had a liberal government that sought to stimulate the economy. By 1831, the conservative government under Juan Manuel de Rosas seized power through terror. Rosas Federalists favored the ranchers at the expense of the Indians or natives, and he's going to fight wars against most of South America. After his fall in 1852, a period of political confusion ensued where they really couldn't form a new government until the creation of Argentina in 1862. Remember, Gran Colombia and Rio de Plata, they're not going to survive, and this is that direct kind of reason for that, and they're going to break into smaller countries. So, speaking of Argentina, let's keep talking about Argentina. So, after 1870, the economy boomed through the export of primary resources, including grain and beef. Argentina's labor force expanded through immigration from Europe. European-born workers brought socialism. The Socialist Party will emerge in Argentina in the 1890s. I want to remind you that, remember, Europeans would migrate to South America and for part of the year and then go back to Europe for the other part of the year. Some of them stayed, right? And with these European-born workers coming through, they're going to establish the middle-class radical party. The middle-class radical party promised political reform and enlightened labor policies to gain power in 1916. But when faced with strikes, the middle-class radical party also reacted repressively, breaking the strikes and kind of clamping down on the people. The model of Argentina for political parties, what that means is that a lot of these kind of socialists and socialist kind of parties will come to power, promising reform and greatness. But the second people strike or become negative toward it, they become dictators, and it just goes back to the way it was. Right? Now let's talk about Brazil. Now, after 1840, Brazil, with Dom Pedro II, will rule in his own name as a liberal. He sought to increase economic growth, foreign investments, and improve the country's infrastructure. The Brazilian economy was revolutionized by the emergence of coffee as an export crop. Now, coffee production expanded, so did slavery. And as slavery intensified as a source of labor, so did the coffee industry. Now, this is kind of counteracted by the extensive European migration and immigration to Brazil, which broadened the labor force and reduced the need of slavery. Now, the biggest Europeans that are going to migrate to Brazil are going to be Italians. Now, slavery is a big issue. Slavery is a big issue in the Americas. And in Brazil, an abolitionist movement forms in about 1840. And won't become abolished until 1888, the last North and South American country to abolish slavery. Now, when Don Pedro abolishes slavery, the landowners that were using slavery were furious at the monarchy for supporting the abolitionist movement, and in 1889, a military coup will depose the emperor and establish a republic. Right? All of this because of he was an abolitionist or anti-slavery. Right? Let's finally talk about the U.S. and Latin America. After the Civil War, the United States becomes more involved in Latin America. Previously, we talked about the Monroe Doctrine, where the U.S. will kind of have a no power, but will kind of boast that it can keep the Europeans out of the New World or the Americas. This directly leads to the Spanish-American War, which lasts between 1895 and 1898. This is with the sinking of the USS Maine, right? And it's all a big mess. The foremast and who wins? Well, of course, the Americans win. The former Spanish colonies of Puerto Rico becomes a U.S. possession, along with Guam and the Philippines, which they are still today. Cuba reduced to dependency of the United States. It becomes like a true dependency, or a true kind of not colony, but basically dependent on the United States. Now, Colombia and Panama. The U.S. wants to make the Panama Canal. Colombia's like, no. Well, during this time in Colombia, Panama has an independence movement to kind of push back against Colombia. Well, the U.S. is going to back that that independence movement in 1904. This quote from Theodore Roosevelt kind of encapsulates the U.S. intentions, like speak softly but carry a big stick. The United States is going to ask Colombia to let Panama be free. They say no, and then they support Panama's overthrowing and kind of independence, right? Panama does gain independence and honors its promise, and the U.S. gets rights to build the canal. This opens the Panama Canal in 1914. Now, Latin American nations become increasingly critical of U.S. intervention in the region. If any government comes to power that's not supportive of the United States will overthrow that government, in what is known as gunboat diplomacy. And so over time, people begin to really be critical of the United States, and we can still see those effects today. All right, y'all. So that's the end of today. Make sure that you're writing your notes in your notebook and that you're completing the vocabulary for this video. Thank you, guys, and I'll see you guys in class.